Good evening. Welcome to the March 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. Please go to wcsoh.org/virtual BOE. From that page, you can also watch the meeting. It is on. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'll start that piece again. Please go to wcsoh.org/virtual BOE. From that page, you can also watch the meeting via YouTube live stream. Though providing an opportunity for public comment during school board meetings is not a requirement, the Westerville City School District Board of Education believes it is an important part of its engagement with and accountability to the community. As part of our mitigation efforts to slow the spread of the coronavirus, and in the spirit of maintaining an opportunity for our public to participate in these virtual school board meetings, we are offering interested persons an opportunity to submit written public comment. During a typical Westerville City School District Board of Education meeting, there are two opportunities for individuals to address the board. While functioning under this virtual meeting environment, the opportunity to submit public comment will open when the meeting begins at approximately 6 p.m. and close shortly after each public comment section is reached on the agenda. Per Board Policy 0169.1, each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes in duration. When submitting your comments through the provided forms, we ask you to please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals by name in the event of a complaint. And you may use the links provided on the district website to submit written comments for the board's consideration regarding specific agenda items, and also regarding comments of a general nature. All comments submitted become a matter of public record and are subject to the release under Ohio law and the Federal Freedom of Information Act. As with in-person public comments made during a traditional school board meeting, members reserve the right to respond immediately or withhold comment in order to conduct appropriate research and follow up with the speaker at a later time. Thank you in advance for your understanding and cooperation. And with that, our meeting will come to order. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman.
Here.
Mrs. Davidson. Mr. Florida.
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here. Agenda item 3.01, the pledge to allegiance. Would you please join us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Continuing on with agenda item 4.01, temporarily suspend board policy PO 0169.1, public participation at school board at Board of Education meetings. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Florida.
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nesbaker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 5.01, district highlights and recognitions. This evening, we will be recognizing the 2021 Division I State Wrestling Champion, Conor Utten. And Mr. Villardo, would you like to share with us, please?
Thank you, President Bell. Very excited to honor Conor for this outstanding achievement that he has done. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the Westerville North Athletic Director, Wes Illifritz, who will introduce the coach of the team.
Thank you, Reverend Villardo, and thank you to Dr. Kellogg, Mrs. Marshall, and members of the board for providing this for Conor Utten, a phenomenal wrestler, as you'll hear about, but an even better young man, and thank you for this opportunity for him. I get the honor of, actually, before I talk about Coach Grant, I want to just throw out a quick congratulations to our friends up the road at Central and Coach Martin, a North grad, for their phenomenal run to the state championship game yesterday. So congratulations to the Warhawks for that. I get the honor of introducing Coach David Grant, also a North grad, and a three-time state qualifier himself, who finished third in his weight class his senior year. He's been our head coach since 2003, and in that time we've amassed 5 OCC championships. He's had 44 state qualifiers and 5 now state champions. This year alone, we won the OCC for the second straight year. We're sectional champions and finished 8th in the state, which was just our third top 10 state finish in school history. Last year, we had 4 young men qualify for state, only to be told just hours before taking their trip to the Schottenstein Center that the meet had been canceled. All 4 of these young men were underclassmen, and this year it was such a moment to see all 4 of them qualify yet again and got to compete at the state tournament. So other than Conor, we had 2 other young men. Jake Gooding finished 7th overall. Brendan Albertini finished 5th overall. And, of course, Conor. So just a great run for our team. Our coaching staff has a lot to be proud of. And with that said, it's my honor to introduce the head wrestling coach at North, Coach David Grant.
Good evening, everyone. Wes, thanks for the introduction. I'd like to thank you for helping us get through the winter season dealing with COVID. I'd also like to thank the board for giving us the season and supporting winter athletics. Let me go ahead and introduce Conor Utten. Conor's a junior at Westville North. He's a great student, great team leader. He went undefeated last year before he could not participate in the state wrestling tournament, and then came back this year and did the same thing, went undefeated on his run to the state championship. Conor Utten.
Thank you very much. Like he was saying, I really appreciate the board for helping us have a season this year, this winter. Yeah, it was a great season. Lots of fun. Like he was saying, third top 10 finish in the state as, school history. It's pretty awesome.
Well, Conor, we're going to have you stay on here because I'm going to read. No, that's okay. You can mute your mic. I'm just going to read the resolution that we have for you from the Board of Education, Dr. Kellogg and Ms. Marshall. But I will say that if you went undefeated last year and you went undefeated this year and you're a junior, Conor, you got some big things to go on in front of you, don't you?
Yeah, so I just learned a couple days ago I've won 66 matches in a row. That's pretty big. Got a lot more ahead of me. A lot more fun things to come next year.
That is really awesome. Let me read this resolution to you, Conor. Resolution of commendation for Westerville North High School. Whereas the best school wrestlers in the state of Ohio met to compete on Saturday, March 14, 2021 at Hilliard Darby High School. And whereas Westerville North High School junior Conor Utten pushed himself through a tough season while the world was facing down COVID-19 pandemic to win a Division I state championship. And whereas despite these distractions and hardships, Conor entered the state wrestling meet with a record of 24-0. Conor began his fight for the state title with a pin of his first-round opponent, Mason Valencia of Barberton, in 3 minutes 14 seconds, and soundly defeated Tim Smith of Coleraine 18-3 in the quarterfinals. And whereas in the semifinal match, Conor faced his junior high club teammate, Jack Haskins of Toledo Whitmer, winning a close match, 5-3, which propelled him into the championship match. And whereas Conor fought off an explosive attack by Darnay Hurd from LaSalle in the opening minute of the championship match, then unleashed his attack, scoring first with a single leg takedown. Conor went on to defeat his opponent 9-2, cementing his place in Ohio wrestling history with a record made possible by his exemplary character and work ethic. Therefore, be it resolved that the Westerville City Schools Board of Education and Superintendent congratulate Conor Utten, his Warrior Wrestling teammates, head coach David Grant and his staff, athletic director Wes Ellifritz, and the Westerville North School community for this outstanding accomplishment or for bringing honor and distinction to our entire school district. March 22, 2021. Conor, congratulations, my friend.
Thank you very much.
So we're not going to go into a lot of detail, but tell us about your final match. Describe it a little bit.
There was a lot of nerves going. I mean, I've wrestled in big matches before, but none quite with that title, like behind it. You know, Coach Grant, he's pretty good at it, pretty good at calming us down. He was just like, go out, do your thing. This is what you work so hard for. Go out and earn it. And like you said, first minute, guy shoots off a great double. That was his best shot. Fortunately, I was able to, hold him off. He almost took me down going out of bounds in the first minute, fended that off pretty well, and then got on my attack, got to my offense, hit him with two single leg dump finishes, and one slide by. That sealed the deal.
That is awesome, my friend. And you actually have a tremendous wrestling coach, don't you?
Oh, he is phenomenal. Yeah.
He's done great stuff at that school. And so we want to really thank Coach Grant and Wes Ellifritz, North Director, as well. So I'm going to turn it back to President Bell. President Bell, would you like to wrap up with any words for Conor and the team here?
Just want to congratulate Conor on being a state champion and representing not only yourself and your family with excellence, but representing the entire Westerville community in such a grand fashion. So congratulations, looking forward to great things next season, and hopefully next year about this time we'll be here at a board meeting recognizing you as state champion again. But congratulations on a great season. And one quick closing comment while we got him here. I also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Coach Grant was actually the coach of the year in the OCC this past season as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, congratulations, Coach, on a great season. Continue to do a great job with the team.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a great evening. Thank you for being with us. Next agenda item is 6.01, approve the minutes as presented of the March 8, 2021 Board of Education meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, additions, corrections? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Next on our agenda, agenda item 7 are reports. Agenda item 7.01, together again update from Dr. Kellogg.
Thank you, President Bell and members of the board. I just want to give a quick update. It's been now, we're into week 3 of being together again. And last time we had a board meeting that was providing an update, we'd been in 1 full day. So we've had a good trial run. I would tell you, I have been visiting schools frequently since even beforehand to look at our readiness and continue that practice going into this week, blocking out time on my schedule just to be around buildings. In fact, I was at Robert Frost today, hung out there for a little bit, and was over at Heritage during dismissal. So getting to talk to people, letting them tell me how things are going. And I would just give you this general overview. It's working well. We're not seeing anything that's surprising to us. People have made minor tweaks to what they're doing, nothing major. Overall, things are going very, very well. A couple of things to share. We've been continue to track cases, and some good news as it relates to staff. Up until about a day or so ago, we've been on a 25-day run of no positive staff cases. Recently, we've had 2, neither of them work-related. So we're seeing very low cases amongst our staff, near 0, really. Quarantine numbers are up. That would be expected, given bringing everybody back and the quarantining standards. A big portion of those are also modified quarantines, meaning because those close contacts were in classrooms or on buses with masks on, those students are in a modified quarantine and can still come to school. There was a recent change in the quarantine standards for athletics as well. Where now those athletes who were exposed during athletic components will be on a modified quarantine as well. So we're keeping kids in school, which is good. People are happy. People are satisfied. I think we were back doing what we're built for and doing what we're good at. I did have a recent meeting of my student advisor group, which is always a great conversation. I appreciate when those students take time to sit down with me, even in Zoom, and give me advice on how to run the school district. And I asked them, what have been the joys? Not unexpected being back with teachers. Classes make sense to me again. I understand the way we work. Seeing my friends, seeing my coaches, being back in my music classes, all those good things that they like about school, all good. I asked them what their biggest concern areas were. Not surprising. I think we see this everywhere. It's consistency with people wearing their masks correctly. People, they'll start talking, the mask will slip down over their nose or over their mouth. And, we talked a lot about continuing to remind people. Even I asked them, do you find yourself when you're at school, you see someone's mask slipping, do you say something? And they said, yeah, we generally do, and people are responsive. It's not a point of friction. It's just a point of help for each other. So they, of course, they notice the classrooms in the hallways are crowded again because we have our kids back. But all in all, it's gone very, very well. So appreciate that. Do want to remind folks that we are on break next week, and I am quite sure there are lots of people with plans for that holiday week. I would ask that we all take part in whatever those plans are in a way that's consistent with all the recommendations coming up from our health departments. Not asking you to change plans, just asking you to make sure that those plans are consistent with what the health experts are telling us during that time period. This is going well. We don't want anything to spoil it, right? So when we come back, we have a few weeks to go. Graduation plans are moving along. I'll even share with the board that we are revisiting the question of prom as We've seen recommendations from the health departments regarding proms and dances has changed. So we're still investigating those as well. So all in all, I think the key message here is we've got this part down. We'll continue to monitor it and continue to work it, but that's more in the rearview mirror, and this evening is going to be more about what's in front of us. And so we'll be excited to share that as well. Happy to answer any questions before we move into the next presentation.
Dr. Kellogg, I just have one, which is I know there's a list of states, you know, that we're keeping track on which states have percentages, I forget the cutoff, of cases that meet a certain threshold, right? The CDC is, I believe. And so I'm just wondering if we could remind people that if they happen to be traveling to any of those states, right, to pay special attention. We want everyone to pay full attention all the time, but just to put it on people's radar what those states are at this point, if there are still any. I think when I checked a few days ago, there were 3 or 4 states that were still sort of on the high alert list. So if we could just remind people, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to remind folks of those particular states, but I think it's, again, it's just like anything else, universal precautions. Wear your mask, practice physical distancing, social distancing, wash, be wise about the activities you engage in, no matter where you go. This is about protecting ourselves and protecting the public. And even those of us who have had the opportunity to be vaccinated still have the same consideration point. So we'll take a look at that piece and see what additional information we can share. We've put out some communication already to our families about advice during this travel period. So good advice. Any other questions? Turn it back to you.
Okay. Hearing no questions, next item on the agenda item 7.02, the bridge plan, extended learning, and summer school. And so back to Dr. Kellogg, Dr. Hopkins, and Dr. Ebrecht. So all of the doctors are in the house.
Thank you, President Bell and members of the board. So we're much more excited, not that we aren't excited to report that everything's going well with Together Again, but we're even more excited to talk about what's in front of us. And so just a little bit of history here, as I've shared with the board in the past. Somewhere around winter break, there's a group of superintendents that I meet with informally frequently, Hilliard, Dublin, Upper Arlington, Worthington, myself, and then Grandview Heights. We meet periodically. And in one of those conversations back in the cold days of winter, we started talking about when we come back and planning for coming back. And the thought at that time was, you know, it would be really wise for us to kind of collaborate on this. We all know that really we've been following similar paths for months and making similar decisions along the way, some timing differences, some logistical differences, but basically much the same way. And we just thought it would be a great idea if we work collectively together on what would be next. So we began that work, and then lo and behold, Ohio put in place the requirement for an extended learning plan from every school district due April 1. Notably, this extended learning plan that the governor said we should do is not anywhere in any legislation. So it's like a really heavily regarded advice or recommendation that we're going to follow and provide. So we had already begun working on that. And then, so what you're going to see this evening as we go through this is at the front end of this is really the bridge piece, which is a much more robust, longer ranging, malleable plan over time. And that we can fit into it the smaller component of the requirements for the extended learning plan that'll be in place. You're going to hear a lot tonight about the coming summer, but that's just part of it. So really, this is something to take us out the next 18 months. So it's not just the summer of 21, it's through the summer of 22 is where we're looking. So, and not just the summers, it's also during the school year. We're already doing things now as part of our recovery plan and working with our students. And then we're just going to build on that going into the summer. So there's a little background in history. So we're going to talk about the bridge piece. I'll share that with you. Next slide, please, Joel. So really, we want to start with success in mind, and I'm just going to pull some words out of here. Notice consistent conversation. This is going to evolve over time as we put things in place. see how they're working, see what impact they're having, see what we're missing. So this is not a everything's done in pen and done right away. This is everything's done in pencil and evolves as we go, and we meet student needs as we start to measure those. And key to this is it's a framework, and we want to look at both the academic and social and emotional needs of our students and our staff and our families. We'll talk about that a little bit more too as we go along. And we just want to continue to look at innovations and how we can engage effectively, both on scale as we talk to large groups of people, which we really recently did through a thought exchange, and how we can work with individual families on their needs and their children's needs. So the engagement piece stretches across that. Next slide, Jill. And so we know there's new realities. You know, rule number one that we're living under is everybody, students, staff, families, has been impacted by this pandemic. We've all suffered some form of anxiety, trauma. It's just not a matter of scale, right? Some folks, it impacted them less than others, but it's impacted all of us. So we want to start from that frame that let's just assume everybody was impacted and treat each other that way, the wellness side as well as the academic side, and not assume anybody was immune to any of the effects of the pandemic, and just know that that's an important piece. But we do know there's disparities, not only about how individuals are affected by the pandemic, but how people's individual circumstances going into the pandemic were different. We know that, the differences in our student populations and their needs, and that got magnified as part of this. So really understanding each individual student, which is always important, is going to be increasingly important this time. And the other piece is to realize that this is not going to be an overnight success. It's going to take time and progress, and continuing monitoring data and looking at how we're doing. It's got to be holistic. There's been a lot of, I keep hearing learning gaps, lost learning. We had lost learning opportunities. We made progress, maybe not as much progress as we'd like. To call it that we went backwards is kind of a misnomer. We may not have made as much progress. And in fact, it's very, we are finding that there are pockets of kids that thrived, did very well in this environment. And so we don't want to just make assumptions about that, but we do want to look at those learning opportunities and what we missed out on. And really want this to be positive. So I've said this before, we kind of have this unique situation a couple weeks ago. It's probably been mitigated as kids have been back in school, but about a month ago, our kids were pretty much chomping at the bit to come back. They were really excited to come back. We had this great moment where 15,000 kids and their families were pretty excited to be back in school. And that's unique. You don't want to ruin that by pounding people over the head with negative messages and gaps and telling them what they're not good at and what they lost. What attracts kids to school aren't gaps. What attracts kids to school are things that match up with their aspirations, match up with their interests and their desires. And that was missing too. So we want to make sure we're reconnecting to those parts as we move forward. And you'll see some of that in our summer school thinking as well. So that school is that positive, exciting place where our students find themselves growing, developing aspirations and developing plans for their aspirations, and not just hitting them with lost learning opportunities and gaps in their math and books they didn't read. We can fix all that. So we want to be very positive and intentional about that. Next slide, Jill. So I mentioned there was a 6 of us who kind of got together. I will tell you that since then we have presented the framework to school districts all across Central Ohio, and we had actually a phone conversation today. It was a share and compare session where there are about 40 of us on the call representing school districts from all over Central Ohio. So new players have joined in, and today was about sharing what we're doing and comparing what we're doing, so we can gain ideas from each other, see what people are doing around this framework. And that's really powerful. It's a powerful message. You know, the 6 districts that are in place represent 60,000 students. So the programming we're putting in place has a huge impact for Central Ohio, and we understand that. We define a lot of the points around this: data, collaborative, comprehensive. A lot of focus on, we already know how to do this. Addressing students' learning gaps and even addressing students' wellness needs isn't novel to us. That's core to what we do. So we have this expertise, we have a lot of these resources. It's now just looking at scale and diversifying that to meet more students' needs. And so we wanted this plan to build on what we have, to share, to be able to be replicated, to provide allowance for school districts to make it fit their individual needs. So it's not, the framework isn't prescriptive as much as it is descriptive of what you can do and what you should work on. Because it's being deployed. I mean, we were on a conversation today, one of our share and compare sessions was with Heath. You know, it's a small school district out in Licking County, but it was a great conversation as they talked about data with their gifted kids and what they've discovered. And they've been in all year. So with some learning points for us, it's something they had uncovered we hadn't seen yet that, you know, gave us pause to say we should go look at that. So we're learning from each other. We also know it's got to be an iterative process of talking to our building administrators and our teachers. What's working, what's not working, what do we need to focus on? So that's kind of the process piece. Next slide, Jill, thank you. So from that, we really framed 4 points of progress, and underneath those, some big levers of impact. What are the parts of the system that we can use to leverage positive movement in towards these points of progress? And it is intentional that social and emotional well-being is the lead. And that's not just students, that's staff. Our staff are tired. It's been emotional for them in a lot of different ways, for a lot of different reasons, not just work. And so helping them recharge, helping them get their feet back on the ground, helping them relax a little bit as we go into summer and going into next year is going to be very, very important. And our students and our families. So we know we have partnerships already in our district that we can leverage. For example, Concord, Warm, we've already leveraged those. We can continue to leverage those, as well as our own data sets, like with our social emotional well-being. We've been using Panorama and collecting that data for several years now. So we have baseline, pre-pandemic, and current, and see how those numbers are impacting. We can drill that down to individual students if we want to. So we have those tools in place to leverage. Academic achievement, you know, we threw the kitchen sink at this thing going into it, and then had to clean up some of the dishes along the way. But we've learned a lot. We have a lot of tools at our hands. And again, this is what we do. We know how to do this part. We know how to build summer school. We know how to do this part. Culture and climate, you know, one of the important things on this we talked a lot about is the professional development for our staff. We learned a lot about public education and its importance in our community and what's important to our kids through this experience. And it wasn't so much that we went, oh, I didn't know that, as much as we went, oh, I didn't know it was that important. Relationships far exceeded in importance to technology. And so we got to capitalize on what we know works with our kids and create that kind of climate and that growth mindset, not this thinking that this is as far as someone's going to go. What is the growth potential? I'll steal a quote I heard from the superintendent who probably stole it from someplace else, or borrowed it from someplace else. But this is about growth mindset and the success of our kids and the long-term trajectory, not the moment. And then equity and accessibility, which goes hand in hand of a lot of what we've been talking about in this district and in our community across the country for a while now, as we looked at social justice issues of racism that are embedded, and the inequities in systems now that were there beforehand, were there in some of our data sets beforehand that we're working on, got more of a spotlight on them during this time period. And so there's a kind of a synergism around the focus on equity and equity education that's been going on, that's driven us, and this moment that's been created by this pandemic moving us forward. So we understand that. And we also know we have additional resources available to us, coming to us financially as well to capitalize on. So those are the points of progress, leverage points that we're going to use internally. Next slide, Jill. And of course, it's always student-centered focus, right? That should be at the center of the whole thing. What we really don't want is to allow this moment to start typecasting students based on the opportunities they weren't able to access because of the pandemic. It's not about them and who they are. It's about the opportunities that they didn't have the ability to access. And so it shouldn't define them. It should define the system and what the system needs to do to capitalize on their strengths as students. We know that, as someone said, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And that's really what we've seen. and we're excited to work on it. So flexibility, looking at what's effective for students. Some are going to be at high risk and need a lot of intervention. Others, their intervention may be less academic, more wellness. We're starting to see that play out in schools now that we're in third week. Some of the social emotional wellness issues of our students, the disruptions of their families are starting to play out in schools a little bit. And that's a good thing, because school's a safe place for that to happen. We have the resources, we have the people to address that. Isolated at home is not the best place for that to play itself out. So we're ready for that. Others have made progress academically, and we don't want to make assumptions that they have not. And we're also talking a lot about families and students having more voice. To point, we used our thought exchange tool and asked families and students and staff, as you project to summer, what might be some things we want to put in place. You're going to see some of that play out in Dr. Hopkins and the team talking about tonight. So we need to continue that. Next slide, Jill. Of course, data is very important. My caution here is we are inundated with data. Some of it is measuring things that have importance to some stakeholders and policymakers, but not importance to all of us for various reasons. So we don't want to chase an endpoint at the other side of a gap that's an endpoint at the other side of a gap that really isn't that meaningful to us. We want to chase meaningful points of reference, meaningful data sets. So we have some data, and there's probably some points of data we don't have that we're going to need to have. We're going to have some blank spots that we haven't measured that we want to take a look at. But overall, I think we have the things in place. It's just a matter of focusing on what the key target's going to be. We know grades. We know credits earned. We have iReady data. We have the points of reference, attendance data. We have points of reference to use to help us as we move along. So we can pace things, group students, et cetera, and make sure that they're ready. It'll be more district-centric on the assessments we have and the information we have than it will be on state assessments. Next slide, Jill. The community engagement piece is not it cannot be a one-time thing. It has to be an ongoing, iterative process at scale, various scales, from individual families contacting their schools, their teacher, their principal, the school council, whatever else they might need, to larger scales of reaching back out to the community saying, how's this working for us? Is this not working for us? What do you think of this? And making sure we're digging in. And already we're seeing community partners reaching out and wanting to work with us as we evolve back into this. And what are the opportunities that are going to be available to us as we move along in the future that we can capitalize on and tap into? And we've created some of those, right? Internally, our virtual success coaches, working with WEF on some of the tutoring services that we've provided. We've made some partnerships that have benefited us that we want to capitalize on as we move further, and we appreciate all those that come to the table to do that with us. And next slide, please, Jill. And my most important parting thought in this is just trying to build this kind of Central Ohio coalition of school districts around this framework and sharing ideas with each other and capitalizing on that and starting to tell stories to our public about what our various school districts are doing post-pandemic moving forward. Because I think there's a story to tell post-pandemic about capitalize on the value our public schools have to our communities. What value we had during this difficult time and what value we have moving forward. That's an opportunity to build that community support and trust that we value so much. It's also an opportunity to start influencing policymakers moving forward on what works and what will not work moving forward, not just financially, but everything from how we view attendance to discipline to state assessments. What's valuable to us and what's not valuable to us. I think there's a key moment here to capitalize on moving forward. So really want to use that opportunity. And that's part of the conversation we're having as we move forward. So with that, we're going to transition over from the general parts of the framework. Before I do, any questions, comments about the framework before I turn it over to the teaching and learning team and let them talk to you more specifically about the components of our extended learning plan moving forward.
Just one point, John. This is almost like a compact, if you will. It's not just a compact with the districts that are working together, but as we look at what you put on here, I was seeing it as a compact with our community. And I am wondering, as we go forward, if we can publish it in many ways as a compact. This is what we pledged to do. This is why we're doing it. And I view that as an important part of that trust development that we have, that we really need to do. It's been a tough year, and a lot of people are tired and frayed around the edges and need to know from us how we're going to be taking care of this. And I would like to see us take this work that you've just presented and publish it.
It's a good idea.
I would just like to thank you for not only participating in this endeavor, but also the leadership that you have helped to bring to the table and bringing Westerville to be a part of this process. You and I have had many conversations about this very thing. And so I want to thank you for that, as well as the other superintendents and other districts that are participating in this process. I think it is going to be very, very beneficial for us to adopt more of a regional approach to this instead of a hit and miss, each district going about it their own way, trying to figure things out on their own. Working together, I believe, is going to be the best route for all of us to take. So thank you very much for participating and being a very important part of this process.
So, Dr. Kellogg, I have two quick points of clarification I'm wondering if you can help with. You talked a little bit about the framework and academically and social emotionally. Can you paint a picture of like what you're thinking about there? I guess I was hoping for a little bit more.
So I think you'll see more in the second part of this from Dr. Hopkins and the curriculum instruction team in terms of some specific programming that we're building that represent the components of this framework, what we're going to do in terms of addressing wellness needs for students and what we're doing to start working on the academic pieces as well. Is that what you're looking for, Mrs. Davidson?
So you're saying there are pieces connected that we're going to hear in the next part that we'll go back to that. Okay.
Yep, I think you'll hear some specificity to that will start to reflect, oh, okay, I see what they're doing as it relates to wellness or just starting to work with students' academic needs and starting to think about staff and their needs moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. And then the culture and climate and integrated choices for students and family, is that also going to be in the second part?
Yeah. Yeah, you'll start to see components of that. And really, what you're going to see tonight is the first month's worth of work that's in place that gets us going. Some of it is really, as you'll see, work we've done before that we're going to replicate because it works. But then you're going to start to see how we're building around that to expand that out to some of these other pieces. So I think Dr. Hopkins and his team will help with that.
Okay, great.
So can I turn it over to Dr. Hopkins and his team? You guys are on.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall, it's my pleasure to add a little more specificity to the Bridges concept that Dr. Kellogg had just spoken about. First of all, I certainly want to thank the entire teaching and learning team. It's been a very collaborative approach to arrive at some of these identified solutions. As Dr. Kellogg said, the governor asked for us by April 1st to develop a plan, and it's called an extended learning plan, and it focused specifically on two things: addressing academic and addressing social emotional needs. So that's what this plan is going to do. But even more than just a required compliance-driven plan, we really want to reiterate that we are looking for what can best meet the needs of our learners and our teachers, our educators, and our administrators throughout the district. So I always try to look at things with a positive, optimistic mindset. And one of the great things about being required to do a plan is to celebrate and to identify things that we've already been doing that have been proving to have some great dividends for us. As you know, we've been addressing the social-emotional needs of our students and our families by through Tammy Santa and her team, really reaching out to families, driving to families and supporting them. Carrie Dennis and her team have been providing families with much needed meals to support them during this time. Our secondary department has already started some academic supports where they have initiated some targeted approaches for students who are falling behind, whether it's for graduation or just grade advancement. So there are a lot of things that are already going in place. And this plan, what it seeks to do is to identify these areas of success and recognize other opportunities for growth as we move forward. Now, recognizing that this plan must address the needs of all of our learners, our entire teaching and learning team has been involved in the development of this plan. We have incorporated feedback from a number of sources, and Dr. Kellogg mentioned a thought exchange that hundreds of our parents, our students, and staff have responded to find out ways that we can immediately address some of these learning gaps and social-emotional issues over the summer. So we're so appreciative of their feedback, and one thing that I can pledge to them is we are going to continue to come back to them and seek more feedback so that we can engage, or better yet, re-engage our students in our community in a positive way. What you see on the screen in front of you here are the four kind of pillars that the state has asked for us to use to help guide our work. And I'll be speaking to these four, but I'll also be expanding on. The first one is identification. We recognize that the stakes are extremely high at this time to reach our students and identify their needs, who they are, and how we can help them grow. So we are already using iReady data in our kindergarten almost through 8th grade levels to identify specifically what students are needing support. And I really do appreciate all of our departments, but especially our elementary department has done a great job to use iReady this year to specifically identify students and invite them to come to our summer school learning programs, which Dr. Ebrecht will talk about in a little bit. So instead of just guessing and inviting a few, we've been using data very intentionally to make sure that the students that are in most need of supports are coming. And then once they come, we're going to be using this data to identify specific learning gaps. So again, we're not guessing. We're using multiple high-quality data sets to ensure that we are providing the foundational literacy and math supports that are so needed for our early learners to make sure that they experience success. And then if there have been any learning gaps, that they can remediate and improve upon those as quickly as possible. So again, iReady data, other sources of data are being used intentionally to identify, and we're going to continue to use those data sorts and other data points along the way. And for the socio-emotional, some of that data points is going to come from Panorama and other things that Tammy and her group have been using. Under the resources and partnerships, as Dr. Kellogg mentioned, we're so fortunate in Westerville to have great partnerships with WARM, with the Parks and Recreation. And one of the things that we have specifically started to work with is the Westerville Public Library. I've been working with our district equity team, our family and communication subgroup has been looking at how can we reach some of our students who don't have library cards, for example. So we've been partnering with them to ensure that at the start of the next school year, every student who doesn't have a library card will have an opportunity to have one. And we know that library cards are a lot different than they were when we had them, when it just opened up books to people. We want to make sure that the library card and the online resources and all of the additional benefits that come with it now are being given to all of our students to help them and ensure that they are successful. So again, one of our things that we're going to be very, very intentional about is not only leveraging the partnerships that we have, but also creating new partnerships so that we can move forward with them along the way. In the approaches section, and this is probably the most specific one I'll be getting into, is looking at what have we learned in the past year. We constantly hear a desire to return to the normal school year. And although we are also grateful to have our kids back in a more normal learning environment, when we return next year, we're not going to be coming back to the normal school year. And I mean that in a positive way because we've learned so much this year. We've learned new things that work. And some of it is the online technology technology, the use of Schoology, the use of some online resources that have helped so many students who through a preferred learning modality thrive in this way. So we're not going to throw that away. We're going to continue to use that. We're going to continue to use what works to ensure that next school year, this summer, next school year, and the years after that are leveraging what we've learned in the past year to ensure that all of our learners with learning differences, have opportunities to be successful in their learning. So again, I mentioned the Schoology. I also wanted to mention what our teachers have been doing at the elementary level and will be starting to do at the secondary level, and that's the development and refinement of online curriculum resources. We have learned that there's been a gap there, and there's been an opportunity through some of this new funding to develop some of these online resources by our teachers, for our teachers, to support our learners, to ensure that they are being able to, again, address all the different learning modalities that our students have learned. We're also being very specific about addressing needs of our students with learning differences. We're seeing that some of our interventions need to be refined. We're learning that some of our MTSS and RTI efforts are there, but maybe need to be, again, enhanced a little bit and try to explore how we can best utilize them. So we're going to be using some of the ESSER grant funds to specifically re-examine these procedures and processes and see how they can work best. As a parent of students with learning differences, I know that there are such positive outcomes that can come when you just try something differently and you provide students with just-in-time support so that they can thrive moving forward. And that's what we're going to do. We're also looking at adding preschool to our summer learning this year. That's something new that Gertie Glass, Suzanne Kyle, and others are going to do with our students with disabilities in our preschool. I say downstairs here at the Early Learning Center, and give them an opportunity to continue the learning that has been interrupted through this year, so that as they mature on to kindergarten, we can address some of these skills and some potential gaps along the way as early as possible. I also want to address that our English learners population, Dr. Lucy Rader Brown and I have been having some really strong conversations about how we can support some of our EL teachers with new professional development that's going to ensure that literacy, for example, I know Dr. Salisbury is going to be on a little bit later possibly to talk with Ms. Relford, but I've been privileged to be part of a Know Better, Do Better learning on literacy foundational work, and some of that similar work is going to be provided to our EL teachers to support them so they can support our EL learners. And finally, there in that alignment section, we're being very intentional about developing a plan that's consistent with our district academic and equity efforts. It's very easy, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is when you're asked to write a new plan, you just add more to the plate. And that's not what we're wanting to do with this. We want to make sure we use this plan and the accompanying resources to support and refine our existing efforts. We have been doing great things for many, many years, and we want to use this plan to, if you will, intensify and to target our and focus our efforts to support our staff during these times. Jill, if you can move to the next slide. In summary, again, what does our plan include? We're going to be using high quality data sources, strong professional learning opportunities by our staff and for our staff. Evidence-based, targeted, standards-based academic interventions. We want to use what we know works that's going to be helping all of our learners. And I failed to mention a little bit earlier, I was on a roll talking about our gifted learners. That's another group that we have been intentionally looking at to ensure. I know Dr. Kellogg mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation with Heath's district earlier today, but we want to make sure that we're addressing any gaps that students who have been identified as gifted may have to address the learning of all of our students there. I've shared this plan with WEA leadership. We're going to continue to evaluate and monitor this plan. This plan is a fluid, dynamic plan that will be needed to change. We're going to be committed to making course corrections along the way and through having those ongoing evaluation mechanisms to ensure alignment and to ensure that we're guiding our processes there. So with that, before I close, and feel free to answer any questions you may have, I certainly do want to again thank my entire teaching and learning team for their incredible work over the past few weeks to develop a plan that I think is putting us on the right path for success for our students and for our community. So are there any questions before I pass it along to Dr. Ebrecht, who's going to add a little more specificity about our summer school programs?
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind, Dr. Hopkins.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for this. I really appreciate all the work that goes into it. And my first question was just if you could talk about the process of developing the plan. And I'm wondering what role that teaching staff have had in these conversations, just so that I can sort of visualize how things are coming about.
Right. No, that's a great question. Like I said, I have been sharing this plan with the WEA leadership, and many of our teachers on special assignment up here at the curriculum office have been instrumental in the development of this plan. We've been intentional to have the thought outreach, the community, the thought exchange to get feedback from teachers and staff to learn what they would like to see in summer learning programs, and we're going to continue to involve them. I'm trying to also be respectful of, we have been asking them a lot in the last couple of weeks about surveys. So I want to be respectful of the fact that they are incredibly busy doing amazing things in the classroom. But as I mentioned, we are going to be committed to including them along the way to ensure that this plan is meeting their needs.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have this plan, and as you mentioned, we have lots of plans,
Sure.
and the plans sort of stack together, right? And so I'm assuming that, but just want to sort of talk it out for a second, that this plan will then require us to revisit some of those other plans and maybe make some adjustments to them. So I'm just wondering if you can, talk about whether you've identified some places where, that exist in other plans that we definitely want to revisit, or is that sort of the kind of analysis that's going on right now?
That's a great point, and that's something that's going on right now. But we've been looking at our district goals, we've been looking at our student success plans, our district equity plans to see where there's alignment, but we're also identifying some, maybe, for example, our technology plan might be something that we need to revisit moving forward, in response to what students have learned and what they have shared with us about how they have been able to leverage technology to become successful. So those will always be in place, and that's one of the things that this team has been really helpful for me, is that final bullet on this slide here is to ensure that we have intentional breaks to stop, pause, reflect. What do we need to do differently? And that's not only this plan, but all of our plans. So yes, you're correct.
Thank you for that. I appreciated your comments about how this isn't just to add more, right? That we want to really evaluate, because that never works well when you just keep adding.
Right.
And then finally, just while you're on for a moment, while I have you here, I'm wondering, could you talk about our seniors and what's being done to really identify those seniors that are needing additional help right now? Because of course, as Dr. Kellogg said, we're looking like 18 months out, and they don't have 18 months.
That's right. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Reeves if he's on here to also be prepared to support me on this, because I know he's been doing some great work with our principals and our school counselors to specifically identify what students may be short some credits and what some things are being done to ensure that we're providing them with those resources. As I mentioned, he and his team have already started some of those support plans, so that right when we came back, a lot of our kids, specifically who are transitioning from WVA to the blended and now full-in program, to make sure that they have supports so that they're going to be passing all their classes that they need and have the supports to be successful. Mr. Reeves, are you able to provide anything further about that?
Yeah, thank you, and good question. And members of the board, I'm sure you are aware that in the last several days, there's been legislation passed with an emergency clause, which allows it to be enacted immediately, which provides graduation support for not only our senior class, but our junior class, specifically around test scores, where those students are allowed to substitute the grades in those tests for the test score itself. So for example, if you have a student that received a B in government, that student would get a 4 on their test. It's very similar to what they did last year. And for the senior class, they're also allowing school districts to declare a student to be a graduate if they've met the curricular requirements and are on track to graduate. So basically, they've met the requirements as set forth by the Westerville Board of Education. And so We are going back and identifying all of the seniors because we were initially not thinking that we were going to get a break from the test scores and all of that. So we were really scrambling about what we were going to do for students coming up short. But now it's just identifying those students who are short of credit. Several of those students are in the EOS program, and Dr. Ebrecht and his staff are taking great care of them. We have tools and mechanisms at our disposal. We have the credit flex process. We have the use of our Apex licensing. We are also in the process of working on digitizing our courses so that students that may be lacking 1 or 2 credits, we have time right now to help them. And so like we did last year, we're very, very hopeful that a large, overwhelmingly large majority of our seniors will get to those football stadiums in Memorial Day and get their diploma.
Thank you so much for the detail on that. I knew that some changes had come down just recently, so thanks for talking through them, and I appreciate that we've got a little more flexibility than we originally thought that we might.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in. I appreciate the comment about a plan gives us reason to celebrate. Kind of ties back to what Jen was saying and what you were saying also, Dr. Hopkins, about not layering on yet another plan, yet more, new, when there is so much that we do well and that we know how to do. What I appreciate most about what you're saying in the big picture is that this appears to be an asset-based approach. And I think that's extremely important for us to do instead of a deficit-based approach. It's important for all of our students. It's important for all of our staff as well. And focusing on the things that we do very well and making tweaks as we need to make those tweaks and targeting where we need to target is, I think, our best path forward. And I appreciate very much the approach that's being taken. I was concerned when I realized that there had to be yet another plan provided to the state by April the 1st, but the way we're going about it and the engagement approaches seems to me to make good sense. I do appreciate also the engagement work that's been done, not just with Thought Exchange, but also with the full involvement of our TOSAs, because those teachers on special assignment provide important teacher voice. And sometimes I think we forget the importance of that particular teacher voice because those TOSAs bring a significant amount of expertise and connectivity to the information that they provide for us. So kudos to you for where this is going. I know it's a work in progress. There is much still to be done, but I like the direction and the way we're going.
Thank you.
So Dr. Hopkins, I would just like to follow up with my 2 questions. I can put together the framework pieces. I see that there. The culture and climate and integrated choice for students and families. Can you explain that a little bit more, go a little bit more in depth for me?
Sure, and that's something we are kind of prioritizing, to be perfectly honest, is what we had to get the academic and the social emotional, but the culture and climate is something that we're mindful, especially of our staff, in trying to know how difficult this year has been for them to address some of those needs. And we actually were just having a conversation yesterday to look at different ways that we can support teachers in developing a strong culture and climate, because what I've seen in the buildings has just been phenomenal the past couple of weeks. Our teachers have done a phenomenal job to really welcome and reconnect our students back to the setting. And it's a culture of just community, if you will. And those are some of the things that we're going to continue, because what we know from research is you've got to have that strong culture and climate in place before any significant learning can be done. So not only are we looking at the the foundational literacy and math, but we're also looking at the culture and climate issues there. We're going to be spending a lot of time this summer looking at specific ways to do that. So that's an issue that I know Tammy Santa and I have been having conversations about, and to address not only student well-being, but also staff well-being along the way. So yes, those are things that we're aware of and we're moving forward with in the planning stage.
Paul, do you guys want to press on to the next part?
Sure. I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Ebrecht, who will be talking about our summer learning opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Wonderful to be here again. 26 years I've been having conversations around summer learning and as the school administrator in Westerville. And yes, we're coming out of the pandemic, but at the same time, we've been very intentional in our summer learning, and we've been a model for districts. And it's wonderful that we have this in place. People call us, ask us, what do you do in the summer? And it always comes back to, do you have a board that supports it? And we have a board over the 26 years I've been in Westerville that has always been supportive of our enrichment opportunities for our students, but also targeted intervention during the summer. And this summer, we're going to be back in person, we fully anticipate, and better than ever. And so I just want to go through what we are doing so that we are thoughtful, we are intentional, and we have that targeted intervention that we need, not only to prevent summer regression, but also pandemic regression. Dr. Kellogg, I agree full-heartedly that we've had kids that have excelled and done well in a virtual setting, while at the same time we acknowledge there's kids that need that extra support, targeted intervention, and we believe that we can provide that in the summer and get students to, in large part, through remediation efforts, especially in reading and math, that's targeted and taken to next. So with our elementary program, we are combining our K-5. In the past, we've had a K-3, a 4-8, and a 9-12. We're going to house our K-5 program under one roof and service those students intently over at Hawthorne Elementary. Middle school, our 6-8 program will be at North, and our high school program, we're going to focus on credit recovery, course advancement, and the board, again, as we continue to enhance ourselves, we're going to be offering musical production, which I'm extremely excited to talk about here in just a little bit. Next slide, please. So you can see here our dates. We're providing this to our community. It's on our website. If you type in Westerville Summer School Learning, you'll find first link. This will take you to a page all about our programming, the dates, and we realize that in our elementary program, it needs to, again, be very targeted, skill-based. At the middle school, we've learned over time we need to make sure that we are having a holistic approach to this, make sure that it's engaging to those students, and through that process, we've seen great increase in enrollment. The board challenged us about 3 years ago to increase enrollment, and in subsequent years we have. Actually, I think that was 4 years ago. And then also our 9 through 12 program, again, the whole piece about credit recovery versus course advancement and what that looks like, we're going to talk about. And we, of course, we continue to offer physical education. Next slide. So our elementary program, Dr. Kellogg mentioned iReady. It's a wonderful tool for us to ascertain what our kids need in terms of academic intervention, and we can provide that through these diagnostics. And again, it's going to be in reading and mathematics. I'm very pleased to say that we've been extremely conscientious over the years regarding fees. This year, I am very excited that there will be no charge for our students on free and reduced lunch. Zero. We've worked hard with partnering communities, like with just different in-house communities, partnerships, and we've provided scholarship opportunities. This year, you can almost say everyone has a scholarship that's on free reduced lunch. It's zero cost. And we've also reduced our price for full pay. Anyone that does not have free reduced lunch, in the past it was $150. This year it's going to be $75. And we have breakfast and lunch covered. Carrie Dennis called me today. We talked through that. And so we're excited to be able to provide that opportunity for our elementary students, breakfast and lunch. And it's a 4-hour program. It will run 8:30 to 12:30. Next slide for middle school. So in our middle school program, we realize that this whole idea about filling academic gaps, but we need to make sure that we're doing it in an experiential basis where kids are excited to come. you know, you got the elementary kids who just enjoy school in general. Then you got your high school kids, they need the credit in order to graduate. In the middle school, we have this group of students that, you know, do they really want to come? Would they rather do other things? What we're trying to do is have a program that this is a great option, a great thing to come to, and you're going to enjoy yourself. So we focus on this like a STEAM-oriented activities. We're going to be using the land lab, the pond over there at North. We're going to use the shop. Kids are going to be creating things, but it's all going to have a focus in the area of English language arts, mathematics, the engineering, the science. All that's going to be interplayed, and we have top-notch teachers that even including an art teacher that will be there and doing things with graphic novels, for example. So we look forward to that. And once again, fees are waived, no charge. If you're on free reduced lunch, $75 full pay. Then I'm excited. Next slide, please, Jill. About our high school enrichment opportunity, our summer musical. Last year, you know, we were going to have a wonderful musical production, but then the pandemic hit, and then we did a virtual one. And while many high schools chose not to do anything, we continued and moved forward and had a virtual play. Students did a wonderful job putting that on, and students blossomed from that opportunity. And so we're going to be hopefully in person now, and we have, you know, I was talking to Matt Wolf today, and he has the various team members ready. Kim Mollahan, I know, has shared some interest as well from North, and then Stephanie from Central, and we're going to continue to work together collaboratively to put on a wonderful production, and we look forward to having it in-house at Westerville North High School this summer. I'm not sure what seating capacity we're going to have, but we're going to be hopefully in person for that, and we do offer elective credit. And it's $25 per student, and of course, we have community partnerships that help offset the overall cost. The board has provided dollars for this in the past, and we hope that it will continue to be a break even, or in fact, we might make even a little bit of money on the production itself. And then from a high school perspective, I want to continue with that. Our credit advancement is actually going to be free to students. Excuse me, let me back up. Anybody that's recovering credit, it's free. So students that may have failed a course are going to be able to take that course for free this summer. And then for credit advancement, we've cut the tuition in half. So if a half credit is $100, and for a credit advancement for one credit, it's $200. In the past, a full credit was $400. And we've been using what are called ESSER funds for that, and that's going to help us reduce our cost to families. So for example, if a student wanted to advance a credit, half credit in health, it would be $100 per student as opposed to $200. So we feel we have a summer learning opportunities program where all students can come. In terms of invitation based for elementary, based on data that we have through iReady. Middle school is again through teacher collaboration with our administrative staff on who we feel is most at risk. And then our high school kids, anyone can come to that program. Again, credit recovery or credit advancement. And then of course, again, we have our musical production. So bottom line is we're being very intentional. And I do want to celebrate because I see what happens behind the scenes. And in these meetings, Barb Wallace, Scott Reeves, step up advocating for kids, Dr. Hopkins' leadership as well, looking at ways in which we can get better at serving students and support them, taking the opportunity during a crisis situation. How can we advance ourselves? So I appreciate everyone's leadership in that, and Dr. Kellogg's as well, especially on a Central Ohio basis. So that's it for summer. You've heard me talk about summer. I'm excited about this coming summer yet again, and continuing to enrich our students, but also remediate skills that have been lost over the past several months. And we believe that we can take them forward. So thank you. Questions about summer?
I was going to ask Dr. Hopkins, if you wouldn't mind, maybe to comment a little bit more on some of the other efforts that are still going on in terms of the other kinds of opportunities we're looking at creating. Is that a fair question, Dr. Hopkins?
The summer learning, we're also, and this is, I'm glad you teed me up there. I was waiting to try to jump in. We're looking at a program tentatively called Ignite, but we're haven't landed on that one entirely. Is one of the things that we got from our feedback from Thought Exchange was students' desire to reconnect, and not always reconnect in math and English, but learning other skills, whether it's money management, cooking, just a variety of different life skills or success skills that students wanted to do. Maybe it was to increase their practice when they're band, for example. So what we're going to be doing very soon is we're going to be sending out kind of a request for proposals. So I think maybe Ms. Davidson, you were talking about like some of the culture and climate and student interest and staff interest. We're going to be providing opportunities for teachers to say, you know what, I'd really like to expand on this learning opportunity this summer, and then have almost a catalog of opportunities that they have suggested and other topics that students have voiced, and then have students sign up for these opportunities over the summer. So we're really excited about this as an extension or an enrichment learning opportunity that goes beyond the summer learning program as we have there. And we think that these will be learning opportunities that address some of that culture and climate issues, but also for staff as well, because we know that staff are working incredibly hard right now. They're doing a phenomenal job. I can't stress that enough. Every time I go out there, we're just constantly amazed by the wonderful work they're doing. But they have said, you know what, I'd like to have some professional learning around this. And so we're going to be hopefully maybe hosting some sessions for teachers, learning with teachers and learning from their expertise along the way. So we're really excited about those opportunities as well. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed and didn't speak about that a little bit earlier, but yes.
Thank you.
So, Scott Ebrecht, you were talking about the reduction in fees, which I think is great, and I'm excited about that. But I'm wondering if you can fill me in a little bit on what are we looking at as regards cost to the district?
The cost of the district is about an extra $45,000. But again, it's being paid through ESSER funds, but that's about what I've estimated it's going to be.
Great, thank you. And have we been looking into transportation issues?
Well, several years ago, it's wonderful because we know the history, Nancy, over several years, how we've added transportation and taken that totally off the table in terms of what I mean by that is every student has an opportunity to be transported in the summer. So there is no issue with that, and transportation has been put into the budget, and we've had that, and that's a significant amount of money. It's probably about a $75,000 option, but yet we know that we need to level the playing field for our families. And over time, there was one time, for example, we didn't have kindergarten as part of summer learning. We added that. There was one time we only transported K through 5 students. Then we added K through 8. Then we added K through 12. So yes, transportation's covered, but again, it goes back to a board, and I'm not placating the board, but I will say the board has provided us those resources. So when people call me from outside of our communities and ask about how we have summer learning, and I put all the components together, at the end of the day, they need a board that will support it. Okay, resources are not infinite; they're finite, and we take advantage of that, and we appreciate the board supporting us.
I do think that sometimes we forget that other districts don't do summer school the way we do summer school, and it's kind of amazing what is able to be done. And Scott, I thank you so much for all of your work over all of these years in turning this into the incredibly successful program that it always has been. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out this summer, especially with that re-engagement focus that we have. And I'm also interested in the components that Paul, you were just talking about. It seems to me that it's almost an opportunity for a family to design a camp. So you can choose the courses that you would want to be engaged in whether those are enrichment opportunities like you were talking about with cooking or whatever that turns out to be, engagement opportunities there, enrichment opportunities, and then the ability, if necessary, to engage in the intervention approaches, whatever that package might look like for families. There's been a lot of stuff as parents try to determine what's going on with their kids this summer. As I listen to what we are proposing to do with summer school, I really do see design a camp for families, which I think is an exciting evolution for our particular summer program. Thank you for all of this hard work.
So Scott, can we talk a little bit about enrollment? I know in the past you had some data. We talked about how many kids were invited and then how many actually took us up on it. Do you have that, or do you remember any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so in our summer programming, typically in the elementary program, we will invite around 1,600 students, and
Okay.
we'll get around probably around 450 that take us up on that. It'll be interesting this summer, given that the pandemic and the degree to which we do that. We'll see what families want to do. I know some families have said that they want to engage, and other families are saying we just want to take a break and start fresh in August. There's no arm turning. Families have to do what they feel is best for their family. But what we try to do is take them where they are, and we will take any student that we know through our diagnostics, through our data, because we definitely are being objective about it in terms of inviting those kids that we feel need it, and then it's up to the family to choose, and then we will transport them and feed them and be with them for a good part of a summer day for 4 weeks.
Sure. And so as you look at the data and the different components we have now to target kids, do you expect the numbers to be about the same as far as invitations?
Yeah, we're actually going to probably be inviting about 300 more elementary students, for example, K through 5, than we've had in the past. Middle school is about the same. And, because it's COVID, I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of, in the past I could always predict because we had, solid data every year after year after year. Because of this opportunity, and also, there's still some families that they're choosing not to come into school for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
So you have that component too. So we just I don't know what the data says, and you know what? I hope we don't have to have trend data on pandemics. Okay,
Yeah.
So one and done, and then it's a blip, and then we move forward and start going back to the previous data set, which was 2 years ago.
Okay. And then there's no way we would cap it, correct? Only accept a certain amount of kids?
Tracy, we would never do that. I was trying to think of a good thing to say, but I would resign if we were told to cap it rather, but that'll never happen.
I think the controlling resource isn't going to be, it will be enough teachers to staff the demand.
Right.
So on the other side of this is a teaching force that's pretty tired too. So what we want to do is be intentional in our invitation process to families, to make clear the need and awareness, to open the aperture of access by reducing costs, taking costs away, taking transportation away. Notice 2 meals provided, which is another attractive piece, to try and attract more people to the program. And then whoever doesn't participate, we still have that cohort of kids understand, okay, what does that mean for next fall for that cohort of kids? Because now you have a percentage of your kids that you identified for intervention this summer who opted not to, a percentage that went in, and they're going to remix in the fall. And now you really have 3 cohorts. A cohort of kids that we didn't identify for need interventions, a cohort that came in the summer, and a cohort that we identified but didn't come. So what does that mean for the fall? So that's where this thing starts to evolve. So we will make it as accessible as possible, and we're going to do our best not to make limited. And I think it'd probably be worth clarifying, if the board doesn't mind. I might ask Ms. Marshall to explain a little bit about the ESSER part of this, because we're throwing out an acronym and there maybe people are wondering what's an ESSER. So Ms. Marshall, you might want to clarify that for folks.
Yeah, so this is part of one of the many relief acts that the federal government has done. So it's ESSER, ESSER. It's the Education Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Grant, I believe. So we are looking at round 2. We had round 1 earlier in the year, so this is round 2. So that's where the budget for this is coming from. And ESSER is meant to help address some of the learning loss that schools are seeing due to the pandemic. So this fits right in with everything that they're planning to do.
So
Tracy, I'll also say, I'm sorry, you were asking about staffing, and staffing we have fully covered in terms of we have plenty of applicant pool to be able to staff this fully depending upon what we need.
Sure, and really my question to you was more of what a welcoming environment that has been created for our kids and our families, and that all of them were welcome, that we wouldn't push anyone away. So I should have asked it in another way. And while we talk about, you said something about leaving, I want to congratulate you on your retirement.
Thank you very much.
So, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
I've been taking a lot of notes through all of this, beginning, Dr. Kellogg, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this thread justice, but let me give an observation. And then Dr. Kellogg, Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Ebrecht, Dr. Hyde, any other doctor on here want to jump in there, that's okay as well. What I noticed from the very beginning, Dr. Kellogg, you began with what you called points of progress: social emotional well-being, academic achievement, culture, climate, equity, accessibility. One of the bullets under equity and accessibility said a commitment to each voice, which I think is a really great statement. Dr. Hopkins then came in and said, one of the things we have is this identification section in which we are going to ask questions, what students have been most impacted? And I'm also hearing you say something about our staff. How have they been impacted? Then that fleshed out to continue. I'm pulling on this thread here, so pay attention. So that went into where Dr. Ebrecht was saying we have all of these different components lined up for wherever a student happens to find themselves, or where a teacher identifies a student, or a parent, a community member identifies a student as needing some kind of support, right? And then on top of that, I'm hearing that we are going to go, I would say, an extra mile, where we're going to start identifying these voices. Remember, every voice counts. These voices that may not have a library card. These voices that need something extra in the community, and whether that's some of the classes that, Paul, you were citing, financial management, cooking, all of these extra options that another doctor, Nancy Nestor Baker, was identifying as build your own camp, which is what I like that idea a lot. So this sounds like I'm just pointing out disparate members of this, but every one of those things that I just cited is a part of a thread that says no matter where any student is, we want to create a place for them. Which takes us back to Westerville City School District is, say it out loud,
Where you belong.
Where you belong. So I'm just pointing out, and any of you can respond to this, I'm just pointing out that I am exceedingly pleased and proud of the work that Dr. Kellogg, it sounds like you began with a bunch of other superintendents in a room with well, maybe not cigars, in a room with each other, well, on the phone. And
just coffee.
And talking about how can we in Central Ohio perhaps lead the way for Ohio, not only in our summer programs, but in these niche programs around the edge as well. I cannot tell you how good I think it is when we cooperate with other districts, other boards of education, in trying to identify where are the needs and how can we make sure every voice does count. This is how I'm wrapping it up, going back to that very first statement. If we're going to have equity and accessibility, then even the voices you may not want to hear need to count. Even the voices that disagree with you need to count. And it sounds like to me, Dr. Hopkins, you and this team behind the scenes are saying to our students, no matter how far behind you feel you are or how far you want to get ahead, we are going to have a place for you. And I, for one, just speaking for myself, I don't speak for the board. I, for one, I'm very thankful for all of you, the dozens of people that have been involved in this effort to make sure that no student is left behind.
If I can, I would like to just also throw out a, excuse me, an appreciation that this is how we're using those ESSER funds. I think it's an exciting program and an appropriate use of the funds. And I think we'll see the data, that we are set up for it to have a really great impact for students. And Dr. Ebrecht, I especially want to thank you for the middle school, the way you framed the middle school experience in the summer. I know we've done a lot of work on middle school over the past few years, but really making something engaging and taking advantage of those assets that we have at Westerville North, my alma mater, which is a great school, by the way, using the land lab and, using the shop there. So I just want to thank you for putting that together in a way that kids can be excited about it, because that's a hard age to motivate to want to do something in the summer. And so I guess if I were to end with a question, and I don't know really who should address this, but if you're a family and you have a student who's been struggling in an academic content area, but maybe you're not identified for summer intervention, or you're not quite sure what next steps to take, obviously reaching out to the teacher is probably among the best things to do. But for people who maybe want to revisit those assessments or have a little bit more insight into what their students' scores are telling them, how should they go about doing that?
Well, I think a couple of things I'd say. One, and Barbara and Scott, you may want to pipe on this, because I would think not only that classroom teacher, school counselor, principal, advocate. Don't assume because an invitation didn't come that we're not interested in hearing what your need is. So advocating for your child as a parent, advocating for yourself as a student, teachers advocating for their kids, bring it to us so that we can continue that. And I think that's a great communication point that we can work through with Barb and Scott and our principals and our school counselors moving forward, because we want to make sure people feel confident that they're going to get something that they feel they need. I have a general rule in life: never assume I know more about what a child needs than their parent knows what they need for them. So I'm not going to assume I know what they need more than what the parent says they need. So we need to look at that, regardless of what any couple of data points said. There may be other reasons in there. I think, the other part of this summer school program that's worth mentioning, because we did a lot of the academic, but I know at the elementary level, Barb, you had mentioned some wellness pieces on either side of the academic pieces. Do you want to mention that real quick too? Because I think that's an ingredient that should be discussed as well. And I think that's another part of why people might want to access this, right, beyond the academic. Barb, would you mind doing that?
Well, we have a 3-hour block from starting at 9, but school starts at 8:30, and that 8:30 gives children an opportunity not only to have breakfast, but for teachers to hold morning meeting where we work through different components of the PATHS program, which is our social emotional learning component. So we're incorporating that into every day of summer school, just because we know that's a really important part of what students need.
And Dr. Hopkins, am I correct? There was some discussion about adding some school counseling staff in the summer school program. Am I correct? Would you
Yes,
talk
that's
about
correct.
that for?
Yes, we're looking at adding 2 counselors to support that.
That have, in many cases, have a mental health background.
Correct. Thank you.
So, so you put this whole thing together, and there's other reasons why a parent may feel on top of the academic piece that we want to look at. The only other thing I want to talk about in terms of setting expectations moving forward is, okay, this is our first shot at taking our core summer school program that's there, which is the meat of what Dr. Ebrick shared this evening. This is a replication of what we've done in the past. We know it works. We're mindful that there may be an expansion of access of people who need, both from our end and from families. So that's one piece. Then there's these other innovative pieces that we want to try and start to build together to see what we can put in the summer that could be exciting around these other kinds of opportunities for kids we can do that are non-traditional learning pieces, like, taking Coach Jackson's course on how to change a tire on their car, right? Some of us have seen that piece, right? And that's kind of a cool piece. And I can tell you, when we did the thought exchange with students, it seemed like their parents are filling out the information for them, because there was a lot on, teach me about finance, teach me about my checkbook, teach me how to change a tire, teach me how to bake, teach me how to cook, teach me life skills. So it sounds like some of the 16-year-olds might have been napping while their parents are filling out the thought exchange piece for them. Either way, trying to capitalize on those. But those are going to be pieces where we're looking internally into the system for people who want to match up what students said they'd like to do with things that they like to do with kids. So that's going to be the how does that go part. And it may be very robust. It may be smaller this year and growing down the line. We want to put a toe in that water. It's kind of a teacher designed to meet what the student voice is saying piece along the way. So there's still a lot to put around this from our core moving out. But we know we got the core piece in that we're good at, and the school counseling piece, the mental health piece is all putting more into that. And then what else can we do? So, what we see this summer will be a step, and that may lead us to bigger steps as we move forward, even into the school year. Any other questions? I didn't mean to truncate off. I just thought to throw that part in.
From my questions, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and the holistic and robust thinking, and yeah, that message, to families. If you feel like, I guess on the parent side, some of us have seen that, maybe kids eked it out in something, but like the suffering that it took to get there is something we'd like to help them, with, so that it's not repeated next year, right? So those experiences that families have, I appreciate that we're open and inclusive in this. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Kellogg or Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Ebrick?
Ms. Davidson, did that give you more of the detail that you were looking for? I want to make sure if there's something in there we failed to hit on, to make sure we cover it for you.
Yes, very much. I'm super excited about all these opportunities. Very well done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those reports. Next agenda item are public comments, and there are no public comments have been submitted regarding specific agenda items. So we will move on to agenda item number 9, which have to do with financials. Agenda item 9.01, resolution to approve the purchases in accordance with ORC 5705.41D1 and Board Policy 6320. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall, would you like to talk to us about this, please?
Yes, thank you, President Bell, members of the board. So we have 2 then and now purchase orders on the agenda for tonight. So a then and now purchase order is when we have a purchase order that's dated after the invoice date. So we have one to the Worthington City School District that's for reimbursement for excess costs for a preschool student that's being served at Worthington City Schools. So excess cost is the cost to educate a student over the normal, the regular education cost for special ed costs. So that is a bill that we are responsible for as the resident district. Also, we have one to the Columbus City School District for tuition. This is for a student that is being educated in the Columbus City School District for, could be a various number of reasons, and we are the resident district that is responsible for the cost of education. These invoices are in excess of $3,000, so they require the board's approval in order for us to pay them.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 9.02, to approve the financial report and investments for February 2021. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Ms. Marshall, would you please share with us about this?
Yeah, thank you again. So this is the month end, February 28th, month end financials. So for the general fund, we have year-to-date receipts of $155.3 million, year-to-date expenditures of $123.7 million, and we ended with an unencumbered general fund balance of $153.6 million. For all funds, we have year-to-date receipts of $204.2 million, year-to-date expenditures of $188.8 million, and we ended with an unencumbered fund balance for February for all funds at $273.2 million. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Marshall? Discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is the personnel consent agenda that is comprised of agenda items 10.01 through 10.13. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Mazzi, would you please share with us about the personnel consent agenda?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. Good evening. I would like to present to you for your consideration this evening the personnel consent agenda. The items contained within, for the most part, are through the normal course of daily business. However, some items do deserve to be highlighted in this agenda. One of which you've mentioned, and that was a retirement specifically of Dr. Ebrecht. But we also have, as you can see there, Donna Hunt, Susan Luckenbach, Dr. Ebrecht, Amy Bircher, Kathy Fisher, Marie Kimchi. I say that this evening, as you know, I usually don't list it all out, but just in the Westerville City Schools, that's about 120 years of service. If you look at their overall service, because a few of them had service outside the district, that's 158 years of service that is leaving. So please join me in thanking them for their service to the Westerville school community. You see many resignations on the license side. Many of these are due to, I don't want you to think people are jumping ship, but they're just members who were on a leave of absence that have decided to resign and stay home with their children, and certainly we support that. You see a change of assignment for Jesse Martin. I just want to remind the board this was part of our restructuring plan, and this position is going to be paid for through the wellness and student success funds. And then you see just a few one-time payments, and again, several opportunities for our staff to have a positive impact on our students and our learning community. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those for you.
I don't have any questions. I do always chime in and say thank you to our retirees. There are always names on there and recognitions of incredible careers and wonderful service to this community and to building the next generation. But I do have to call out Scott Ebrecht. Scott and I have worked together closely many, many times. And I have counted on Scott more times than I can say. And I trust his knowledge. I trust his heart. And I don't know anyone who has more concern, compassion, care, love for the students in this district than Scott Ebrecht. And it has been a joy to work with you, Scott. And I don't know what I'm going to do without you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velarde?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Next agenda item is old business. Agenda item 11.1. There no old business for the board to consider. Moving on to agenda item 12, which is new business. Agenda item 12.01 for a first reading of policy 1662, Title 7, anti-harassment. Mr. Mazzy, would you speak to us about this change, please?
Again, thank you, President Bell. I would like to, if you'll notice on this agenda, combine, there are three policies, 1662, 3362, and 4362. They are actually duplicates of one another. What you'll see different, however, is 1662 covers administrative staff, 3362 covers the professional licensed staff, and 4362 will cover the classified staff. As you'll see in general language, this is an update to our current language together with renewed policies and procedures, if you will. This will clarify the roles and responsibilities to align with current and or appropriate terminology and processes and procedures to help guide our district in regard to these three topics. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mazzy.
Thank you.
Moving on, next agenda item, 12.04 for a first reading is policy 5517, anti-harassment. Ms. Meisner, would you please share with us?
Thank you, President Bell, members of the board. Policy 5517 is the student section of the anti-harassment language. And to recap what Mr. Mazzy indicated, the language in this policy has also been changed to reflect the policy changes in the other 3 personnel policies, and is consistent with revisions brought forward in 2020 by the federal U.S. Department of Education. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 12.05, first reading for policy 8510, and that's Ms. Meisner again.
President Bell, members of the board, policy 8510 is our student wellness policy, which exists to promote student health and to help in curbing childhood obesity and combat problems associated with poor nutrition and physical inactivity. This policy has been revised to reflect that there is a requirement now for the policy to be looked at least once every 3 years, including some language to make sure student equity occurs and childhood nutrition. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I think there's another policy coming up that can more explain this in the food services section, sister policy to this policy. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Meisner. Next agenda item, 12.06, a first reading for policy 8330, student records. Ms. Marshall, would you share with us about this, please?
Yes, thank you, President Bell, members of the board. So 8330 is our student records policy. This policy governs student records, how they're kept and how they may be released. There is one amendment, one paragraph amendment to this policy designating audio and or visual recordings of class lessons, regardless of the medium upon which the recording is made or kept, as directory information for the limited purpose of only allowing students enrolled in the class to review the lessons for academic purposes. And it is important to know that recordings of class lessons will not be released as directory information beyond this specific limited purpose.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Marshall? Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Next agenda item is a first reading, agenda item 12.07, which is a first reading for policy number 8500, food services. Ms. Dennis, would you please share with us about this?
Good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg and Ms. Marshall. Policy 8500 is the food service policy. These changes are some housekeeping items that reflect recent changes in job titles, as well as revisions that reflect the USDA's emphasis to prohibit stigmatizing students who lack funds to pay for school meals or students with unpaid meal charges. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Dennis.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, 12.08, first reading for K through 5 ELA materials and course of study. Ms. Relford, would you please share with us?
Good evening, President Bell, members of the board, Mrs. Marshall, and Dr. Kellogg. I'm here to share the recommendation for English language arts materials adoption purchase. As an elementary team, we've been transitioning to an English language arts model for instruction that supports the science and research behind how children learn to read. We have aligned our work with the Ohio Department of Education, English language arts standards and model curriculum, the Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement, and an evidence-based approach to structured literacy instruction. We have also analyzed data to date to ensure that we are purchasing programs that will support student learning and achievement. The two programs that we are recommending at this time are as follows. We are recommending GEODS, which is our K-2 program recommendation. It is a collection of accessible knowledge building books for developing readers, following the scope and sequence of foundations, which is already board adopted. GEODS text are readable and a unique type of text in which specific decoding strategies are coupled with content and vocabulary. And it does integrate into history, science, social studies, and the arts. The program for our 3 through 5 grade levels, we're recommending Wit and Wisdom. Wit and Wisdom features knowledge building lessons and carefully curated selections of art and books that inspire a passion for reading and writing. Students will practice writing, reading, speaking, and listening, academic vocabulary, and style and conventions in concert to build holistic ELA knowledge. I do have available tonight to answer any questions that you might have of members of our team are Barbara Wallace and Dr. Tanya Salisbury, and we will open to questions.
I have a couple of questions. How is this curriculum different than the curriculum that is currently approved? How would you sum that up for people?
One of the big differences is that we are moving away from a whole language approach to teaching a child to read, teaching a child to read into and away from leveled readers into a more skill-based targeted reading approach to reading instruction. This is drastically different than what we've been doing in the past, but we fully understand that the research supports targeting specific skills for reading instruction as we move in providing opportunities for students to explore rich literature along the way.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think it's very important, the direction that the team has decided to move the district in. Getting away from those levels, I think, will be extremely important to helping to build a joy of reading rather than a chore of reading. So I'm excited to see how this goes and really looking forward to it. I'm wondering if you can give me a sense, turning my attention to the materials themselves, what the balance is between fiction and nonfiction.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Salisbury because she's been digging in a little bit more deeper so that she's probably better equipped to answer that question. Dr. Salisbury?
Sure. I can answer that. I've spent a lot of time digging into the materials, definitely. Can everybody hear me? I'm hoping.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So there's a heavy emphasis on nonfiction reading because we know that that is the type of reading that students need to know how to read and engage in to be successful academically. Of course, the GEODS product for grades K through 2, it's a lot of nonfiction, but also a lot of fiction. Both programs, GEODS and Wit and Wisdom, come from the same company, Great Minds, and they're dedicated to growing background knowledge in students, which is one thing we see that gets in the way of providing an equitable literacy learning experience. Students come with various background knowledge. These two programs work together to help students grow their background knowledge while gaining literacy skills. So I would say Wit and Wisdom has more nonfiction experiences, where GEODS has fiction and nonfiction. probably evenly, I would say. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will tell you that I have hated to see over the past several years the continuing reduction of fiction, not just here, everywhere, as the state has moved in that direction. It's not to say that nonfiction can't be remarkably entertaining, and it is, of course, extremely important in building those particular skills and background knowledge that you talked about. But fiction itself is extremely important in building a whole range and wealth of skills and imagination that go beyond sometimes what nonfiction can do. I'm glad that we aren't doing away with it more than we are. But, you know, as I think about developing reading in the elementary grades, and I think about the importance to in developing a joy of reading, not just a mastery of reading, I think that there is a very strong place for fiction in that. I do think that materials that are selected will help with the joy of reading instead of just mastery, as important as mastery is. But it seems to me that in the elementary years, developing that joy, laying that foundation for that visceral connection to the printed word is a key thing that we do. You know, there's that old saw that says you can't legislate morality, and I'm not talking about morality here, but it's just that comment that's made sometimes. You can't legislate joy of reading. You can't, through our approval or any development of any curriculum, legislate the joy of reading, but you can legislate the joy out of reading. And I think that in some ways, some of the things that states have required districts to do or push districts to do, things that have been done with the very best intentions, reading levels and so forth and so on, actually have not helped to build that joy of reading. I think that where we're going with the course of study that we're talking about tonight, and the materials as well, can help us to do a much better job, if you will, of building that visceral connection to the printed word, the joy of reading. So I thank you very much for the information on it. I'm eager to see us take these steps forward. Thank you very much.
I have just a quick comment and maybe a little question in there. I'm ecstatic that these pieces or these products were chosen around the science of reading, because we know how very important it is for, as Nancy was saying, children to love to read for every aspect. Tell us a little bit about teacher training and how that looks going forward so they can learn a little bit about this.
So we have continued to share that that Tanya, Dr. Salisbury, has led a book study on helping to solidify that foundation of the science of reading. And the book is Know Better, Do Better. And we do encourage you to read that book so that as board members, as members of the district, as members of the community, that you get a better understanding of where we're going and why. And Tracy, you have been a wonderful support to us throughout this work, and we want to thank you for your participation in those works. In reference to professional development for teachers, once we get the process of your approval, we will work quickly with the vendor to secure those materials so that they're ready and available for our summer training for teachers. Our goal is to have resources so that they can be given those resources the 2 weeks after school lets out. So they'll be able to attend voluntary training those 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks before teacher contract begins, we'll offer the training as well. And then on top of that, we'll offer the training on our Westerville Educator Day in August. And so we are creating these opportunities for teachers to participate in the PD around the ELA adopted materials upon receipt.
Thank you. I think it's also worth to mention that we already have some pieces of curriculum that we already use, the Foundations and Haggerty, that will complement these pieces. So teachers are already familiar with some of this.
Yes, they are. K2, we have board adopted foundations, and foundations aligns with the GEODS program, and they will work hand in hand with meeting the needs of students. Haggerty, right now we have students K and 1 using, and teachers using Haggerty, which is a phonics intervention program. Tanya will be leading in another part of that training for teachers in grades 2 to 5, which is called Bridge the Gap, and that will happen before the end of the school year. And then we will move nicely into the board adopted materials and immerse teachers in training before the summer begins.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Ms. Relford?
I guess I just have one quick one, probably for Dr. Salisbury. As far as the particular selections in this curriculum, can you talk a little bit about, whether diverse authors and topics are represented, just to thinking about how this course selection fits with our equity initiative?
I'd be happy to talk about that. I'm really excited that these two programs made it through the process because they really do align with the very direction our district is going. In fact, today I ended our final meeting of the winter book study for Know Better, Do Better, talking about that literacy is an equity issue and how we need to be providing instruction that is best for all students, not just most students. And both of these programs support that. They are evidence-based and they are thoughtful in the product, the stories, the cultural diversity. Both programs, I can speak to Wit and Wisdom. It went through a very strong vetting process through Ed Reports, and that's something you can look up online, where this company takes programs and they go through a very intense analysis of the program, and it got excellent across the board. It covers every need that an evidence-based program has, and along with GEODS as well. So we're building that background knowledge, but we're also representing a diverse population of students and background knowledge in both of those programs.
Great, thank you for that summary and for making that part of the conversation around our course materials adoptions.
Okay, moving on. Thank you very much, Ms. Relford, Ms. Salisbury. Next agenda item 13, recommended actions and standing business. Agenda item 13.01, donations. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, we certainly want to thank all of those who have made these contributions to the staff and students of Westerville City Schools. At this time, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, that motion carries. Next agenda item 13.02, approval for 2021 capital improvements, HVAC projects. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn, would you please share with us about this?
Yes, good evening, President Bell, Vice President Dr. Nestor Baker, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg and Mrs. Marshall. The HVAC improvements are per the request of our in-house HVAC team. The scope of work includes replacement of the 2 rooftop units serving the gymnasium at Point View Elementary School, replacement of rooftop unit number 1 and 2 hot water boilers and pumps at Wilder Elementary School, replacement of 4 chilled water pumps, 2 hot water pumps, and the related VFV drives at Genoa Middle School, replacement of the 2 rooftop units serving the gymnasium at Heritage Middle School, and the replacement of the pneumatic HVAC controls with direct digital controls at North High School. This will allow our central station to monitor and adjust the HVAC settings for these devices. Bids were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on February 18th and publicly read on March 9th. We received 2 bids, with the lowest responsible bid being submitted by the Regal Plumbing and Heating Company in the amount of $1,472,323. This is slightly over the architect's estimate of $1.47 million by $2,323. The work is scheduled as part of our 2021 summer capital improvements program, with August 3rd as the contracted substantial completion date. It is being recommended that the board accept the bid for the HVAC improvements from Regal Plumbing and Heating in the amount of $1,472,323.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions for Mr. Dorn? Hearing none, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. The motion carries. Next agenda item, 13.03, approval for the replacement of the Blendon Middle School gym floor. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn, would you please share with us about this?
Yes, President Bell. The replacement of the existing or original wood gym floor is per the request of our in-house maintenance department. The scope of work is to replace the existing wood gym floor with another wood gym floor. The existing floor is being removed under a separate contract using an asbestos abatement contractor due to the existing floor mastic containing asbestos. This work will be done in the summer. Bids for the new floor were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on March 1st and publicly read on March 16th. We received 1 bid in the amount of $86,388 from Final Floor Incorporated. Final Floor's bid amount includes alternate 1A in the amount of $600, and that's to add the Blendon Bulldog Center Court logo, which the school asked us to do. The total project cost, including the abatement work, is $26,212, or 18% under the architect's estimate. The work is scheduled as part of our 2021 Summer Capital Improvements Program, with August 3rd as the contracted substantial completion date. It is being recommended that the board accept Final Floor's bid in the amount of $86,388.
We certainly got our money's worth out of that floor, didn't we?
That's what I was going to ask. Did you say that was the original floor?
Yes, I believe it is.
Has anybody called Rick Bannister about getting this floor? I'm sure he wants it in his house. Sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes. Motion carries. Next agenda item, 13.04, right-of-way easement by AEP. Mr. Dorn, I'm sorry, may I have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Mr. Dorn, would you please share with us about this?
Yes, President Bell. With the need to have electrical service supplied to the new elementary school site, the approval of this Ohio Power Company or AEP easement is being presented. AEP requires an easement and right-of-way to provide the electrical service needed. Therefore, it is being recommended that the board grant the utility easement to the Ohio Power Company or AEP as shown on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, I had an opportunity to drive up and see the work that is taking place this past weekend. It's nice to see walls going up and it's starting to take shape.
It looks
exciting.
Fantastic. It looks fantastic.
Okay, Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nussbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Next agenda item 13.05, approval of the 2021-2022 student fee schedule. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Hopkins, would you please share with us about the student fee schedule?
Good evening again, President Bell, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg and Ms. Marshall. Tonight I bring for your consideration the 2021-22 students fee schedule. In tonight's information, there's a modification to the schedule that updates the annual income guidelines associated with all-day kindergarten. We recommend that the board approve the student fee schedule as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, comments for Dr. Hopkins? Okay, thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nussbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries. Next agenda item is 14.01, public comments. And these are general comments. We have one comment that has been submitted by Mrs. Mary Lou Hiddle. And her comments reads as following. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. On behalf of Reading Matters Westerville, we would like to thank the Board of Education for their commitment to our students. We would also like to congratulate Paul Hopkins and Scott Dorn on their recent appointments to the newly developed positions of Assistant Superintendent. As you may know, House Bill 436, Connor's Odyssey, the Right to Read law, was recently signed by the governor. This is a piece of legislation that establishes a statewide dyslexia committee, which will be developing the guidebook that will inform district administrators on required practices for mandatory screening and supporting students with dyslexia. In addition, the committee will be establishing requirements for professional development in the area of dyslexia for teachers and staff in various capacities over the next few years. As stakeholders, Reading Matters Westerville looks forward to working with the district as these new mandates are implemented in the coming months. Thank you for your leadership during these challenging times. And thank you, Ms. Hiddle, for submitting that comment this evening for board consideration. Next agenda item is agenda item 15.01, board comments. Who would like to begin this evening? Reverend. Well, we'll go. Well, let's start with you, Reverend Velardo. We'll start the other end of the alphabet.
I'm just going to dive right in here. I prefaced my first comment with saying that.
Turn your mic on, please.
I preface my comment by saying that my wife refers to me as cheap. I would prefer the term frugal. Mr. Dorn, if we've taken up the floor on one school, could we take that floor and use it in one of our new schools to save some money? Mr. Dorn, what do you think of that idea?
Not this particular floor.
Okay, all right. I appreciate your answer. I really do. And I mentioned Mr. Bannister because he likes to remind us that Glendon Middle School was not always the Bulldogs. It was originally the Bobcats. And so I just wanted to put that out there. That's why I mentioned Mr. Bannister. Really, my only comment, President Bell, is to again congratulate our Westerville North wrestler for just, a state achievement is just such a wonderful thing, state championship. And the fact that he was undefeated last year and undefeated this year, and he's a junior, I don't think we want to put pressure on him, but he's got one more year, so that's just exciting. And the final thing, what I tried to say before, don't know that I said it very elegantly, but I am exceedingly pleased, Dr. Kellogg, Dr. Ebrecht, Dr. Hopkins, and that whole team trying to create opportunities and ways that we can serve the kids who are students who may have felt a lot of stress and being behind and struggling with that. I think Mrs. Altman is exactly right. We want to have an extra eye and ear on our seniors just to make sure that they are being well cared for. I'm looking forward to this summer. I think there's some wonderful opportunities out there, and thank all of you for presenting those. And I'm not going to tell you to do a financial awareness thing for our middle schoolers, but statistics show that might be a good idea. But I'm just going to leave that one right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Velardo. Let's go with Ms. Davidson.
Sorry about that. I don't have any comments tonight. I think I spoke enough, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Altman.
Thank you. Well, again, I want to congratulate Connor. What a great achievement. And also, I know we did at the time, but just to thank Coach Grant. I mean, when you talk about there are so many highlights in this district, but that Westerville North wrestling team and what Coach Grant has built there, it just comes up again and again. And it's a place where our young people really learn to be, I think, wonderful people. So I really value that program, and thank you to Coach Grant for that. And lots of good news, about looking forward. So thanks for all the reports. I do just want to, we're always doing lots of thanking up here, but that's because there's so many people doing good work every day. Just really appreciating the teachers and the staff in the buildings in making this all work, to have the students come back in the buildings. And I want to appreciate our students who help remind each other to wear their masks properly, right? And even let the superintendent know that sometimes they need to remind each other. So keep up the good work, and great news tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altman. Dr. Nestor Baker.
Well, I too am looking forward to this summer, Rick. I think it's fascinating to consider the energy that is driving the bridge plan, and we're going to be seeing that coming into play very, very quickly as summer kicks off and as we move forward. But, as I think about all that we heard tonight, that wonderful energy that is coming forward again from this district. I mean, we've always been a very energetic district, always been doing a lot of wonderful things. But the bridge plan, the curricular work, all of that just underscores the positive motion forward that we're engaging in now. And I'm excited about that. It seemed like this meeting was kicked off into that particular approach to education with Conor and his achievement and with Coach Grant. As Jen, you're absolutely right. It's a wonderful program. These are remarkable young people who are engaged in it, and the coach who leads them is truly a phenomenal individual in the way he is able not only to build the sport, but to build these people into incredible young adults with empathy, with the ability to carry that empathy into good works and to move forward just as we are moving forward. So good stuff happening, good things going on in the classrooms, good things going on with individual students, good things going on with curriculum, good things going on with planning for the district. Yes, this is a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Nestor Baker. I have just a few comments. I would first of all like to congratulate the boys varsity basketball team at Westerville Central for their season and for the valiant effort that they put forward on yesterday. So we certainly want to congratulate them on a great season. Well done, young men, on having such a great season. I would also like to thank Dr. Kellogg and really this is thank everybody, staff, students, community. Thank you all for supporting the Together Again plan. It's very encouraging. I'm very excited to see how we are able to have our students back in at 100% in-person instruction. And we've not seen a rise in our infection rates. And so I'm glad to see that things are working out. Thank you, staff, and for how you have prepared for our students and how you continue to do great work in the buildings. And one closing comment, with spring break coming up, on the heels of how well we are doing with the Together Again plan, just a few things I would like to remind and ask everyone's help with. 4 things I'd like for everyone to do. Wear your mask, wash your hands regularly, watch your distance, and for those of you who can, please receive the vaccination. If we do those things, I believe we will be able to continue to slow the spread of COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So thank you all.
President Bell, just one quick thing on that point, actually. Do I remember that 16 years old and up are eligible for the vaccine on March 29th? Is that the date? Okay, so just a reminder to everybody, 16 and up, meaning some of our older students can start getting vaccinated. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Agenda item 16.01. The board will meet in a hybrid virtual meeting on Monday, April the 12th, 2021 at the Early Learning Center, 936 East Wind Drive, Westerville, Ohio, 43081. Agenda item 17.01, adjournment. May I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Marshall, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes. Motion carries and we are officially adjourned.